Let's talk about Masteries for a little bit, shall we? Season 2 has been upon us for a few weeks now, and my path has changed since Season 1, along with the champions that I'm using to attack with. Therefore, my Mastery build has changed quite a bit as well. If you remember in Season 1, I was running Void, Stark Spidey, and Blade primarily, so I had things like Deep Wounds maxed out for when I was using Blade, I had Despair maxed out for when I was using Void, along with occasionally having the Resonate Mastery. I started out Season 1 with Resonate, but unfortunately it slows down my arena grinds a bit too much to keep, so I actually dropped it before Season 1 was over. But I was running something like that and kind of a bare bones utility setup, and it's changed a pretty good amount actually since then. There's definitely some common masteries that we can talk about, but I want to talk about why I'm not running the exact same masteries as it was back then. And as always, I recommend that you guys figure out the right mastery build for what you are looking to do and the champions that you have. I don't recommend just copying my build here completely. It's never a good idea. It's better to understand why somebody's making the mastery choices that they are, and then work on your own build with that knowledge. So let's get right into it. The first 15, or actually 16 points in the left half of this offensive tree here, just all the points that are on screen right now, it's pretty standard. I really like running maxed out precision and maxed out cruelty. I know some people have been dropping a point or two out of these due to diminishing returns, but honestly, I still think that they're very powerful, fully maxed out, and it's hard to imagine having a build without maxing out both of these masteries. I also have 1 point in courage because it's just a great value pickup. I'm not always below 50% health, so of course there's a lot of times where this mastery is completely useless, but those times where I am below 50% health, I really need that extra attack to finish out the fight. So for 1 point, it's a pretty good pickup. As far as the rest of the offensive tree here, I have 1 point in everything in the bottom right corner of the tree here, which, by the way, I still have 5 points left over in terms of masteries, if you haven't noticed, and I may choose to put some more points in this bottom part. I just want to kind of go over the decision-making together here for these final 5 points. But for all these points here, Unfazed is a great value pickup, just 1 point. Really helps to counter those evading champions, plus it helps out your defenders a little bit. If the opponent is running Stark Spidey on attack, which a lot of people are, it can definitely throw off that Stark Spidey and end up possibly getting you a kill. 1 point in Assassin. I think this mastery is incredible with just 1 point. It is worth putting more points in there if you could afford it as well, but the first point, not only does it give 20% attack versus the other 4 points only giving an extra 10% on top of it, but you also go from 0% of reducing enemies' ability accuracy to 12%. So that first point really is just a much greater value than any of the other points. But again, it's a good mastery to put more points in. It's just that's where the build is at currently right now. I would say it's not essential to max it out. Deep Wounds, I'm actually not running Blade pretty much at all anymore, so I don't really need Deep Wounds. I'm using Medusa primarily, along with some other champions that are kind of like floater option champions. But I'm running Medusa primarily, and then possibly Stark Spidey. He's like my next go-to champion, and neither of these champions really benefit much from Deep Wounds. Medusa does cause bleed on her L2 if the enemy is armor shattered, but to be honest, if the enemy can bleed, if I hit him with an L2, they're dead whether I have Deep Wounds or not, and if they're bleeding because they have Armor Shatter on them, it's a permanent bleed. It's not something that gets affected by Deep Wounds, so Deep Wounds doesn't really affect Medusa for what I'm looking to do in war, not in war. In other areas of the game, sure, it definitely helps out, but not currently in this situation. And of course, this does not help out Stark Spidey, so I'm going to leave this at 1 point for now. Let's move on to the defensive tree. My first 15 points in the left half, this is a standard build that I've been running for the longest time now. I really think that these are the 15 most effective points that you can have for nearly any build. There's other situations where I do like to pick up Perfect Block, and if you are newer to the game, I like the Salve Mastery, but the tiny bit of healing that you get from Salve really doesn't do much for a champion that has, 30 to 50,000 HP, generating, 2 points of health or something like that, or whatever it is, 4 points of health when it's maxed out. I don't really care about that. It's like meaningless. What I do like, however, is if we move on to the right half of the tree. Actually, before I do that, I really am a big fan of physical resistance as well. I think that this is something that scales very well with champions. The more HP they have, if you're boosting up in terms of health and everything like that, it's making each point of boosted health that much more effective, being able to reduce incoming damage. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of physical resistance. I really like this. I mean, originally I was just trying to figure out 15 points to put in the defensive tree to unlock something like willpower, but the more I play this game, the deeper I get into it, I really value this physical resistance mastery, and it's no longer one of these filler points just to unlock the right half of the tree. I really like having it in my builds, just period, if I can squeeze it in there. Willpower. Not some people believe that willpower is not that great of a mastery anymore. I disagree. I think it is a great mastery to have, depending on what you are doing, of course. It's not essential. I will agree with that it's not essential, but there are so many times where I get hit with some kind of a debuff, and I'm healing up as a result of it. Or I could take on a bleed node with my Medusa, even though she's not bleed immune. This definitely will help to counteract that bleed. That's the same reason why I have Coagulate here. It gives me that flexibility to be able to take on a node like that. It also gives me the flexibility to take my Medusa and hit something like a Morning Star, which without willpower and without Coagulate, I would not be able to do that. And I just don't have the champions that would be able to take on a Morning Star if I came across a Morning Star. Maybe if I was running like a rank 5 Blade or something like that, a 565 Blade, then these masteries might not be as necessary, as Blade kind of automatically just shrugs off the bleeds from her quicker. But even still, having willpower just to be able to take on something like a bleed node, oh man, I really value willpower a lot. And again, this is a mastery that I can't really see myself running without it anytime soon. Really enjoy having willpower. As far as utility goes, let's talk a little bit about this. So, I like having maxed out parry. I think the damage reduction on it is quite nice versus just the 1 point. It's not really about the extra stun duration. It really is just that damage reduction. Gotta have Stupefy maxed out. If you don't have Stupefy maxed out, you're not even going to be able to get a parry off on enemies that have maxed out Limber, and a lot of people have maxed out Limber these days. I used to just flip-flop my masteries around to have maxed out Limber when I placed my defenders, and then reset my utility tree, take those points out of Limber and then put them elsewhere, like in Stupefy. But I actually think Limber helps me out offensively a decent amount as well. There's been several times where it saved my life in war, and just also saving me units in the long run is going to help out. It didn't cost that many units to keep switching my masteries around. It was only about 100 units a week, but due to not having suicide masteries anymore, I can't get nearly as many units as I did out of the arena, and that extra 100 units a week that I can save by having the mastery, along with it benefiting me offensively, I think it is worth having, and not just flipping my masteries around. I also really like having Scouter Lens. Scouter Lens gives you that extra bit of information when you're approaching a defender. It's especially useful right now when there are not that many 565 champions floating around. Typically, if you see a 565 on defense, you can almost guarantee know what that champion is before you go into that fight, right? Because a lot of people, let's say right now people have either 1 or 2 565 champions, right? Let's imagine the person you're trying to scout out in war has 2 rank 5 5-star champions. Well, it's very likely that they're either using 1 on attack and like 1 on defense, so you could process of elimination, figure out exactly which champion that is, or they're different class types. A lot of people don't really want to rank up the same class type as their, first and second 565 champions. So they'll have like Blade as the first one, and then Void or Iceman or Stark Spidey or just whatever kind of different class type. So it's very easy to determine if you're going to run into one of those 565 champs. And it also does, it just helps scouting out other champions as well. If you're going to go against a 455, you might want to throw in one of those 3-minute boosts that you're a little bit more limited on. So yeah, big fan of having 1 point in Scatter Lens. 1 point is all you need, because yeah, I mean, you don't really need to know that far in advance what the enemy's hero rating looks like. I don't think you can tell what rank they are until you actually approach the node anyway. So 1 point, perfect. All right, so I have 5 points remaining, and first off, I want to say one of my least favorite things about the mastery system is just how useless a lot of the class masteries are. I left out 5 points specifically to say that if they ever change one of these masteries like Cosmic Awareness, oh my god, I would love if this mastery actually boosted up Medusa in some way. I think it's pretty lame that it doesn't. There's like no effect for a bunch of these masteries. I mean, how long was Pure Skill changed, where it used to be pretty effective, and now it's, not really so effective. I mean, a lot of these, again, mutagenesis, I guess that maybe in some world this can be useful. Collar Tech is actually pretty decent. This is a decent option to think about, especially if you have like a lot of tech champions on defense and using Stark Spidey or something like that. It wouldn't be that bad of a pickup. And then of course, like Mystic Dispersion is pretty good, or extremely good, I should say. Not just pretty good, but I don't really run Mystic champions, so it's not really a benefit to me to pick it up. But I just want other masteries to be boosted in some way, man. But until that happens, I have these 5 points to be pretty flexible with, and what I'm choosing to do with them is I want to put them in the offensive masteries. There's really nothing in utility that I'd want to pick up, so there's no options here. I am not a fan of Petrify or Pacify in the current state of the game, where everybody is running around with maxed out Limber, and there's a bunch of Limber nodes in War. You're getting off like 1 attack while the enemy's parried. I mean, reducing the amount of power that they gain for 1 attack is like, I don't know, man. Who really cares about that? Same thing with Pacify. It does practically nothing in the current state of War. So these masteries are not even something that I'm considering at this point in time. As far as the defensive tree goes, I mean, 1 point in Suture is definitely something to consider. I mean, even maxing it out could be something to consider. It definitely would help take on a bleed node, but I don't really take bleed nodes that much. A lot of the points here, Willpower and Coagulate, they're more so for fighting Morning Stars, and Suture doesn't really help that since you're always applying the bleeds. So it's not really a duration issue. It's just a total damage issue, which Coagulate helps with that, and that's really the only bleed master that can help with that. Inequity and Resonate would be something to consider, but again, it's that whole Willpower thing in arenas. It slows down the arena grinds too much. Otherwise, I do like these masteries, and I would consider it. But so there's really nothing else in this tree that I'm considering that much. There's like the 1 point in Suture is something that I considered. As far as the offensive tree, there's nothing really in the left half. I mean, maxing out Courage is something to consider, but I mean, most of these fights in Alliance War, I'm healing up to full every time I go in. So most of the times, I'm not even dipping below 50% health. This season with Medusa, I'm not even sure if there was a fight where I dipped below 50%. I'm sure there was, except for that one like throwaway fight against the boss. But she's so tanky, man, that yeah, it just doesn't happen that much. So what I'm left with, What I'm left with is something in the bottom right corner, really. I want to avoid Glass Cannon just because I like having that extra health cushion, and I gain so much plus attack from my Furies as it is, that the small amount of plus attack, same thing for Stark Spidey, the small amount of plus attack when you have a lot of poise charges really doesn't mean anything. I'd rather have the attack in those situations. If I was using a different champion, like I think this is actually a pretty good mastery for champions that don't gain a large amount of plus attack, but the champions that do, I'd rather just have the health. So I'm not considering Glass Cannon. So really that leaves me with this bottom right corner. of the tree here, unfazed. I'd rather just have this as a 1-point value pickup. It doesn't apply to that many situations. That's just like a 1-point wonder in my opinion. I already talked about Deep Wounds, so I'm avoiding that one. That really leaves us with Assassin and Despair. So what I could do is I could put 4 points in Assassin, and then I could put like 1 point in Suture just to help out with that bleed node like I was talking about. Or I could do, 4 points in Assassin, 1 point in Despair, get that extra healing reduction. Or what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to max out Despair. Maxing out Despair gives me that extra flexibility to take on certain nodes like Arc Overload, or just reduce healing. I mean, I'm applying debuffs constantly with both Medusa and Stark Spidey. Just being able to reduce their willpower healing even is quite nice. Applying like Armor Shatter plus bleeds, they heal for a decent amount, some of these enemies, and if I could reduce that, that's fantastic. Or just being able to reduce champions' healing in general if they're on some kind of a healing node, or it's just in their actual utility of the champion. I like having this maxed out. I think it's great the way it scales up for having for just putting in those extra couple of points to be able to reduce healing by 15% per debuff. I think it's fantastic. I think that's worth it over the final point Assassin here. I am going to go ahead and put the rest of my points in Assassin. I'm going to be 1 shy of maxing it out, but I'd rather have it set up this way where I have 4 points there and 3 in Despair versus 5 and 2 basically. So this is my build for Season 2 for the foreseeable future. There are going to be some instances where I may choose to switch around certain masteries. But yeah, I'm very satisfied with this build. I can't see myself changing it anytime soon, not in any kind of drastic way. If I change around the champions that I'm attacking with, then I certainly will change my masteries. Again, this build does not apply to everyone. If you're using someone like Blade, which a lot of people are, you're going to want to have Deep Wounds maxed out. You're not going to want to follow this exact build. But in any case, hopefully you guys learned a little bit of something by, kind of going through my thought process here. And hopefully you guys can come up with a build on your own. Something could be similar to this, but you might want to just tweak it for the champions you're using. That's going to do it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.